Hey there, deep divers. You guys sent in this YouTube video about going from the gold standard to fiat currency.
Right.
And it got me thinking, like, is the system we have now, is it really sustainable in the long run?
Yeah.
So I wanted to dive into this video with you and see, what are some of the consequences that this might have, and maybe we can figure out how we can protect ourselves along the way.
That's a great question. And the video starts off taking us all the way back to 1944
Okay.
to the Bretton Woods Agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of sets the scene for how the U.S. dollar became the world's reserve currency.
Okay.
It was pegged to gold at $35 an ounce.
Right.
And this is kind of right after World War II.
Right.
So it created a sense of stability, a sense of like, okay, we can trust this system.
So the whole world was basically running on dollars.
Yep.
Which at that time, I guess, represented a promise of gold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you could take your dollars
Right.
and you could go and exchange them for actual gold.
Right.
This wasn't just symbolic. It was meant to kind of enforce some fiscal responsibility.
Yeah.
It was like governments couldn't just print money willy-nilly.
Right.
Because if they did that,
Yeah.
their gold reserves would get depleted
Gotcha.
as people would kind of run to exchange their increasingly worthless, currency
Mm-hmm.
for the more stable gold.
That is fascinating. So the gold standard was almost like a safety valve against runaway inflation?
Exactly.
Mm.
But this system, it starts to show some cracks around the 1960s as U.S. spending starts increasing,
Mm-hmm.
In part because of the Vietnam War
Right.
and social programs.
Gotcha.
And so countries start to doubt, like, hang on,
Yeah.
does the U.S. really have enough gold to back all these dollars
Yeah,
that are
yeah.
floating around?
Right. Right.
So it was kind of like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever played this game,
Yeah.
musical chairs.
Yeah.
Like everyone scrambling for a seat when the music stops. And countries, led in part by France, actually started demanding their gold back,
Wow.
which put a lot of pressure on those U.S. gold reserves.
Right.
And then it all comes to a head in 1971
Okay.
when President Nixon
Oh.
makes this shocking decision to just sever the dollar's link to gold entirely.
Wow. So that's when we enter this fiat currency era, right?
Exactly.
So remind me, what does fiat currency even mean?
Yeah, so fiat currency is essentially money backed by nothing,
Oh.
more than a government's declaration of fiat that says this has value.
Okay.
It's not tied to a physical commodity
Yeah.
like gold or anything like that.
Okay, so instead of something like gold, our money is based on trust in the government.
Yeah.
It seems a little risky, doesn't it? I mean, what's stopping governments from printing as much money as they want?
Yeah, that's a real concern.
Right.
And the video argues that this kind of lack of constraint
Mm-hmm.
that's inherent in the fiat system.
Yeah.
It leads to this dangerous reliance on debt, on ever-increasing debt.
Right.
And they even go so far as to call it a global Ponzi scheme.
Wow. A Ponzi scheme. Now, okay, hold on.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big claim.
Yeah.
I need you to help me understand that.
Yeah, sure.
How's a global economy like a Ponzi scheme?
So think about it this way. Countries around the world, they sell goods to the U.S.
Right.
in exchange for U.S. dollars.
Mm.
And then they often turn around
Okay.
and use those dollars to buy U.S. Treasury bonds.
Gotcha.
So it's like they're lending the U.S. money back.
Right.
So the U.S. kind of has to keep borrowing more and more
Okay.
just to keep this whole system afloat.
And other countries are propping us up.
Yeah, it's like a delicate balancing act, right?
That's a little unsettling, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it makes you think, what if something disrupts that balance?
Yeah.
What happens if global growth stalls? Or worse, what if countries lose faith in the U.S. dollar? It's like, what happens when the music stops in that game of musical chairs?
Right.
It's a question that the video really wants us to grapple with.
Yeah.
Is this reliance on debt?
Hmm.
Is it sustainable?
Mm-hmm.
And if not, what are the consequences?
So how does this translate to, like, everyday people?
Yeah.
Is this just some theoretical debate, or does this actually impact our wallets?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't just some abstract concept, right?
Right.
It has real-world implications.
Okay.
And the video argues that one of the most tangible consequences of this fiat system
Yeah.
is inflation.
Yeah.
We're all feeling that.
Yeah.
And they go a step further to say the way we even measure inflation
Okay.
might be kind of masking the true extent of the problem.
Okay, this is where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me about this hidden inflation.
Yeah. So they talk about the difference between core inflation, which excludes things like food and energy, volatile categories, right?
Right.
And then you have headline inflation, which includes everything. And they argue that focusing on this core inflation
Yeah.
might actually be downplaying the real impact that rising prices are having on people.
So the numbers they tell us about inflation might not be the whole story.
That's what they're suggesting, yeah.
It sounds like things could be even worse than they seem.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, right? Like,
Yeah.
do governments have an incentive to kind of downplay inflation?
Well, yeah, especially if, like, they're adjusting things like Social Security payments based on those figures.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
If the real inflation rate is higher, wouldn't that mean that those benefits aren't keeping up
Yeah, exactly.
with the cost of living?
And that raises a lot of concerns, right? Socially,
Right.
economically.
Right.
It really makes you think, who benefits from underreporting inflation?
Yeah.
And who ends up bearing the cost?
This is getting deep, but I'm hooked.
Yeah.
I want to know more about, like, how can we protect ourselves?
Yeah.
But before we get there, there's this whole gold suppression theory that the video talks about. And it sounds a little, I don't know, conspiratorial to me.
Yeah, it's a very controversial topic.
Okay.
The video alleges that central banks
Mm-hmm.
and powerful financial institutions, they're actively working to keep the price of gold down.
Okay, hold on. Actively manipulating the price of gold? How is that even possible?
Yeah, so they claim that they're using various tactics,
Okay.
like strategically selling their gold reserves,
Mm.
lending gold to billion banks at super low rates,
Okay.
and even potentially overselling gold that they don't actually possess.
Wait, overselling gold they don't have? What happens if somebody calls their bluff and wants the actual gold?
It's a very risky game if it's actually happening, right?
Yeah.
And it raises a lot of questions. I mean, while these claims might seem far-fetched, the video does present some evidence.
Okay.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but it definitely makes you think, like,
Yeah.
if these claims are true, who's benefiting from suppressing the price of gold?
Yeah.
And why would they go to such lengths to do it?
Okay, my head is officially spinning. We've got potential global Ponzi schemes, manipulated inflation numbers, and this gold suppression theory.
Yeah, it's a lot.
This is heavy stuff. I
Yeah.
think before we go any further, we need to, like, take a step back
Yeah,
and figure out what this means for us practically.
right.
So we'll pick up there in part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so we're back, and last time we left off with some pretty heavy questions about the stability of the system,
Yeah.
the accuracy of inflation figures, and
Mhm.
even this whole gold manipulation thing.
Right.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
Before we go any further, I need to know, are there any real world examples
Yeah.
of things going wrong when we relied too much on fiat currency?
Yeah, absolutely. And the video actually uses some powerful historical example to kind of illustrate this point.
Okay.
Remember Germany after World War I?
Hmm.
They experienced this hyperinflation,
Oh.
so severe that people were literally using stacks of money to light their stoves because it was cheaper than firewood.
It's hard to even imagine that.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Money became practically worthless.
Yeah.
And these kinds of scenarios, they're not just ancient history.
Right.
I mean, more recently, think about Zimbabwe in the 2000s.
Mhm.
Hyperinflation spiraled out of control there as well.
Yeah.
Prices were doubling every single day.
Wow.
So, it makes you think, if it happened to them, could it happen again?
Right.
Even with a major currency like the US dollar.
It's a sobering thought. I do appreciate that the video, brings these things up.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people, they take the stability of our system for granted. Like,
Yeah.
it's always going to be there.
Right.
But history shows that that's not always the case.
Exactly.
The video doesn't just dwell on doom and gloom.
Right.
It does mention, like, this possibility of returning to a gold-backed system as a potential solution.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear your take on that.
Yeah. So the video presents it as one potential way to address those problems
Okay.
that are inherent in the fiat system.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the argument is that by tying the currency to gold,
Yeah.
you're reintroducing this fiscal discipline.
Gotcha.
Governments can't just recklessly print money anymore
Okay.
because they need to have the gold reserves to back it up.
So going back to gold could, rein in inflation
Yeah,
and create some stability.
potentially. Yeah.
It makes sense theoretically, but how would we even go about doing that?
Yeah, it's definitely not a simple solution.
Right.
And the video acknowledges that there are some major hurdles,
Yeah.
like determining a new fixed price for gold,
Right.
figuring out how to manage those global reserves,
Mhm.
and addressing potential issues like hoarding and speculation.
Sounds like we'd be trading one set of problems for another.
It's possible, yeah.
It really is complex.
Yeah.
But even if we don't go back to a full-on gold standard,
Right.
the video still suggests that, simply owning gold could be a smart move in these uncertain times.
Yeah, they talk about it as a form of financial insurance.
Okay.
They highlight its historical resilience as a store of value,
Mm-hmm.
especially during periods of economic turmoil.
Okay.
So when fiat currencies falter, gold tends to hold its value
Right.
or even increase in value.
Gotcha.
And that's precisely because it's this finite resource.
Mm-hmm.
It has this inherent value
Right.
that's not subject to, the whims of government policy.
Okay, I see the appeal, especially with all this talk about inflation and
Yeah.
the stability of the dollar.
Right.
But I'm still hesitant because gold prices, they go up and down all the time.
Right?
How can something that's so volatile be considered a safe haven?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. It's important to understand
Yeah.
that while gold can be a hedge against inflation,
Mm-hmm.
it's not without risk.
Right.
Prices are influenced by all sorts of factors,
Okay.
like supply and demand,
Right.
geopolitical events,
Mm-hmm.
even speculative trading.
So for somebody who's thinking about adding gold to their portfolio,
Yeah.
what's the best way to approach it?
Before diving into gold,
Yeah.
it's crucial to do your research, understand the risks involved,
Okay.
and think about how gold fits into your overall investment strategy.
So you're saying don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Diversification is key,
Gotcha.
even if that basket happens to be made of gold.
Even if it's shiny. Right.
Exactly, yeah.
Sure.
And, even if you believe in gold's long-term potential,
Yeah.
timing the market is really difficult.
Okay.
So, don't try to be a hero and get in at the perfect moment.
Gotcha.
It's more about a long-term strategy.
Right.
It's about having a diversified portfolio.
It sounds like this deep dive is really emphasizing being informed,
Yeah.
proactive when it comes to our finances,
Mm-hmm.
not just blindly trusting that everything's going to work itself out.
Right.
But the video, it hints at something even bigger,
Okay.
like a global power shift.
Hmm.
This whole fiat currency system with the US dollar at the center, it might not be sustainable in the long run.
It's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
And the video kind of uses historical examples, economic arguments,
Mm.
to say that, this current system, which is heavily reliant on debt,
Right.
it's heading for a reckoning at some point.
Okay.
And while it's impossible to predict the future with 100% certainty,
Right.
it raises some thought-provoking possibilities.
It does. What would a post-dollar world even look like? Would
Yeah.
other currencies take its place?
Yeah.
Or could we see a return to some kind of global gold standard?
The video kind of hints at a world where gold,
Mm-hmm.
reclaims a more prominent role
Okay.
as a monetary asset.
Okay.
Maybe not as the sole foundation
Right.
of a new global currency,
Yeah.
but at least as a significant player.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where economic power is redistributed.
Yeah.
And countries that hold a lot of gold,
Right.
they might actually benefit from this decline of the U.S. dollar's dominance.
It's a lot to think about. This whole conversation has been a wild ride. It's definitely challenging a lot of my assumptions.
It's good to challenge those assumptions
It is. It is.
and really kind of dig deep
Yeah.
into these questions.
Yeah, yeah. Before we wrap up, I'm eager to get to the practical stuff. Like,
Yeah.
what can people actually do to protect themselves in light of all this information?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what we're going to be focusing on in the final part of this deep dive.
Perfect. Can't wait.
We'll explore some actionable strategies for navigating this whole complex world,
That's-
from diversifying your assets,
Mm-hmm.
understanding inflation, making informed decisions about gold,
Gotcha.
other potential safe havens. So stay tuned.
Okay, deep divers, we're back for the final part of our exploration into money and gold. My brain is officially full after all that stuff about fiat currency and the potential for a global power shift.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah. But I'm ready to get practical now. What can we actually do with all this information? How can we protect ourselves, maybe even thrive, in a world where the future of money seems so uncertain?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? And the good news is the video, it doesn't just leave us hanging. It actually offers some pretty concrete advice.
Okay.
And it all starts with taking ownership of our financial education.
Okay, I keep hearing that phrase, financial education. What does it actually mean, though? Like, do I have to become a Wall Street whiz or spend all my free time reading economics textbooks?
No, no, it doesn't have to be that intense. It's more about, going beyond just balancing your checkbook or
Right.
blindly following whatever your financial advisor tells you. It's about understanding like the fundamentals of money, how the system works,
Okay.
the forces that drive inflation, debt, economic cycles.
So it's like being financially fluent, being able to, like, speak the language of money and make smart decisions.
Exactly. Exactly. The more you understand, the better equipped you'll be to kind of navigate all this stuff
Right.
and make choices that align with your goals no matter what happens out there with the economy.
Okay, I'm sold. Where do we even begin, though? Any
Right.
good resources you recommend for people who are ready to kind of level up their financial literacy?
Oh, there are so many great resources out there. You don't necessarily need to like enroll in a course or anything. Start with reputable websites, financial blogs, podcasts like this one,
Right.
even documentaries. There's so many ways to learn.
Right.
The key is to find sources that are informative, but also engaging. Make it fun so you actually enjoy the process.
It shouldn't feel like homework.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so once we have a good grasp of the basics, what are some tangible steps we can take to, like, actually protect ourselves? The video mentions diversifying assets. What does that look like practically?
So diversification is all about not putting all your eggs in one basket. Right.
Okay, so instead of just having all my savings in a bank account or putting everything into the stock market, what are some other things I should consider?
Yeah, so there's a whole world beyond stocks and bonds. Real estate is a classic example.
Okay,
You could look into precious metals like gold and silver, which we've been discussing.
right.
And then there's the whole world of cryptocurrencies, although, those come with their own set of risks and rewards.
Right.
Each asset class has its own kind of characteristics.
Okay.
So the key is to find a mix that aligns with, how much risk you're comfortable with and what your goals are.
So you're creating a balanced portfolio, like a financial ecosystem where different assets can kind of balance each other out.
Exactly, exactly. And remember, diversification isn't like a one-time thing.
Right.
It's an ongoing process. You need to monitor your investments, rebalance things if you need to, adapt to the changing conditions.
Gotcha. So we've got diversification, and the video also talks about understanding inflation. Why is that so important?
Because inflation is sneaky. It's like this hidden tax that eats away at your money over time.
Right.
If your investments aren't growing faster than inflation, you're actually losing money,
Yeah.
even if the numbers look like they're going up.
That's scary. It's like running on a treadmill. You're
That-
putting in effort but not really getting anywhere.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So how do we fight back against this inflation monster? Well, one way is to invest in assets that tend to hold their value.
Like gold.
Like gold, exactly. We
Cool.
talked about how it can be a hedge against inflation. Right?
Yes.
It's a finite resource. It has that inherent value.
Yeah.
And it's not tied to the performance of any particular currency or government.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, it's tended to do pretty well over long periods of time. But remember, gold prices can fluctuate too.
Of course, of course.
It's not a foolproof solution, and it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. Got to diversify.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But even beyond specific investments, understanding inflation also means being a smarter consumer. Like, are you spending your money on things that matter to you?
Yeah.
Are you paying attention to prices and adjusting your spending habits accordingly?
Right. Right.
It's all about being aware and making conscious choices.
So much of this comes down to mindset, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It's about being engaged and informed, taking control instead of just feeling helpless.
I love that. You're absolutely right. Despite all the, warnings about potential crises and all this complexity, this video really empowers us.
Yeah.
It's a call to action. Educate yourself, think critically, and make those informed decisions.
It's been a wild ride. We went from the history of the gold standard to a potential global power shift. And we even figured out some practical steps to navigate this crazy financial landscape. Hopefully this has given you a lot to think about.
Yeah, I hope so. It's been a pleasure unpacking all this with you.
Likewise.
Remember, this is just the beginning of your journey. Keep asking those questions. Keep learning. Keep exploring. This world of money and finance, it might seem intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. With a little effort and the right mindset, you can feel confident about navigating whatever the future throws at us.
Beautifully said. The big question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Keep that curiosity burning. And stay tuned for our next deep dive.